Becoming a founder has taught me lots of very important things for life. So in the end, COREangels today is a network of angel funds. Each angel fund has its own investment thesis. Each angel fund has its own leaders. Today we have one closed fund. They have already reached that number of startups portfolio. They are close to investors. And other 10 that are active, so they are open to new angels and still building the portfolio. We are close to 170 angel investors and more than 60 startups invested. Usually the goal of the fund is from 3 million to 5 million, 6 million for each fund, yeah.
Max Pog builds a startup studio.
Hello, Cynthia. I'm very happy that you joined my video show about VC, angel investors, and startup founders. So today we'll talk about COREangels, your role here, about angel investing, and I congratulate you with taking a position of CEO at COREangels. So how do you feel about this?
Thank you, Max. Well, thank you for this time and opportunity. It's great. I like every moment that I can have about talking about angel investing, which is my passion, and especially about COREangels. And as you're right, I have taken this new role as CEO of COREangels. It's been some busy times, of course, as taking this new role. So I have a few challenges. Right now, COREangels is expanding a lot. So we have the challenges of, at the same time, growing, expanding the network, but also taking care of the active groups of the angels and the startups that have been invested by our funds. So it's been a lot to do, but it's been really fun.
You started with corporate world, then you started your own startup, and then you entered VC world. So can you describe your path?
Yeah, indeed. I started in corporate. So my career was, I studied computer science, and then I did a master in administration. So I started in big companies in corporate. And then one day I decided to leave this to found a startup. And it's a totally different role. It's two different worlds. And we see that sometimes they try to get together, they try to get along, but they are still very different. And so when I moved from a big corporation to a startup, of course I felt all the differences. It's not that easy, it's really hard, especially if you're in a position in your career that you already have some benefits, or you have conquered some status and you have a career ahead to follow. This comfort a big company can give to you, okay? We have a path, we have a career plan. And when you decide to found a startup, there's no career plan, there's nobody telling you, yes, you're doing good, or no, you're not doing good in this and that. And so becoming a founder has taught me lots of very important things for life, I guess, not only for business, not only for my career, but for life. When there is no path, you have to create the path. When there is no formal signals that you're in the good path, you have to look for the signals and look for the client's answer, the response, the investors, all the information that you can get to see if you're a good path or not. Of course, that when you are in a big company, you have your staff, your team, you have all the support, everything already working to make you able to do your job. When you are in a startup, you have to create all these mechanisms, all these tools. You don't have staff, you have very short staff. So you have to learn how to operate in diverse mode and playing all the roles that you can. But in the other hand, of course, there are many advantages. So in a personal life, having the control of your agenda and defining where you're going to, it pays off the effort.
Can you describe what was the startup?
Yes, the startup is a startup that serves the energy sector. It's a startup that works with satellites to map oil reserves, oil seeps in the sea, in the seafloor.
Did you fundraise?
No, the startup was totally bootstrapped. We tried to fundraise. By that time, it was like 10 years ago. So the VC market was not that structured. We saw some angel investing starting, but very amateur and it was kind of very lucky to find someone to be an angel investor that could really contribute to your startup with the knowledge that you needed.
How an idea of startup came to you and how you decided to quit corporate company?
Yeah, well, I decided to quit the corporate world basically because of two reasons. One is that I thought it was time for me to try something new that I could manage and that I could have control over. And then I had this opportunity to join a startup that a founder had already founded. And also for personal reasons and for having a better lifestyle, it was also something that came to me. And that's why I decided to move. And then after founding this startup, I started also mentoring other startups, because with my corporate experience, I could help some early stage startups in their approaches to companies, especially the ones that were B2B. So many times people were developing technologies or solutions and they didn't know how to present it to the corporate world, or they didn't know how to sell it or how to map. Sometimes sales to corporates can be very complex with many actors playing different roles. So I started mentoring them in this sense, trying to help them with their commercial activities and being more successful in approaching companies. And then I started mentoring other startups, like in programs of accelerators, incubators. And then I started thinking of investing. But then between thinking of investing and really investing, it took some time. Because I wanted to invest in startups. I thought that I could contribute to them also because of my experience. But I never felt confident enough to do that by my own, alone. Because I thought, well, it's a risky thing, investing in startups. It's something that you shouldn't deploy a lot of your capital on this. It's a high-risk investment. And I thought that maybe I could not be one thing I wanted to diversify. I didn't want to invest in one startup, but I wouldn't have money to invest in 10 to be able to diversify the risk. But there is also another thing, that is, how could I really trust my judgment in picking the great deal, a good deal, and how could I select the startups? Would I be the only person to evaluate them and make a decision? So I took a long time before investing. I just started investing when I met this approach of investing in a portfolio. So when I came to Portugal, I met a group of investors that were just like that. They put their money together and they invested in a portfolio of startups. So this made me think, well, maybe this is time to start this. And then this is how I started.
So first you joined Red Angels, am I right?
Yes, yeah.
What was the year of this?
This was
when you moved to Portugal?
2018, yeah.
And then, can you describe what is COREangels?
Yes.
And do you do both activities in those?
Yes. I'm still an investor in Red Angels. But then we also started to replicate this model, and we started a COREangels group. So it's a different brand, but it's a similar model. In COREangels Atlantic, I'm also an investor, and we invest in Brazilian startups that are coming to Europe. And then we started replicating this model to other groups. So other people, usually experienced angel investors, wanted to provide a different angel investing experience to startups and to angels also. And they decided to launch a fund. And so they partnered with us, and we licensed our model, our brand, to them, so that they can use our methodologies to launch their angel funds. So in the end, COREangels today is a network of angel funds. Each angel fund has its own investment thesis. Each angel fund has its own leaders. So we are based on 3 pillars. First is professional leadership. Each angel fund has 2 or 3 leaders that are responsible for running the fund, so selecting the deal flow, bringing opportunities to the angels, and also after the investment, which is very important, following up with the startups, promoting the interaction between angels and startups. The second pillar is investing in portfolio. So our angels, they don't invest alone. The decision of investing is a collective decision. So if the majority of the angels, they decide on approving that startup, it's the money of all of them that is going to be invested. And the third pillar is active involvement, because we truly believe, and research shows us also, that the most that angels can contribute and really be supportive to founders, we have much higher expectation of returns. So these are the three pillars that every COREangels fund has. But of course, they are different in investment thesis, in ticket sizes, and local laws or business environment. Some practice, the leaders are autonomous to change, to adapt. But the model itself, it's the same thing for all the funds.
Could you please elaborate on the difference between Red Angels and COREangels and how this COREangel started? So you joined the team, which was already doing this, or you?
No, I was one of the investors at Red Angels, one of the angels. When we had WebSummit 2019, I guess, one of my colleagues at Red Angels thought of creating a specific fund for those Brazilian startups coming to Europe. Then he talked to the founders of Red Angels, and so they decided to build this fund. I was in the beginning of this fund. Also, I invest as an angel in this fund. So this was the first COREangels fund that we built. And then after some time, we got another colleague from Red Angels that wanted to launch the fund in his city. And so we built the second group, and then we started doing this. Then in 2020, the founders of COREangels asked me to work, to join the team in a full-time dedication, so working with the team. And we started designing our acceleration program for launching funds. So basically, we run this program with people, investors who are interested in launching their own funds, angel funds. And they go through this program with us. And in the end, they have this group launched.
So now it is a network of VC funds, which are led by local business angels. And sometimes the thesis is not geographical, but industry focused.
Yeah,
yes?
we have some geographic funds, angel funds, which are agnostic in industry, but they invest in the startups of that region.
Madrid, Barcelona.
Madrid, Barcelona, Lisbon also. And we have what we call cross borders, who are this angel funds that invest in startups that are wanting to expand to other markets, like COREangels Atlantic, bringing Brazilian startups to Europe. But also we have COREangels Pacific. They work with Latin American startups that want to attend to serve the Southeast Asia market. So it's like the Ring of Fire region that they call. And we have the industry focused. So in the industry focused, we have health equity and mental well-being. It's an angel fund based in New York. We also have climate. It's launching right now. It's investing in startups that are fighting against climate change. They are funding startups in Europe. Enterprise Tech, who has already launched, and they are focused in companies supporting enterprises and different challenges, based in Europe as well. And EduTech in Brazil, they are investing in educational startups in Latin America.
So let's talk about figures. How many funds do you have? How many investors?
Today we have one closed fund. They have already reached that number of startups portfolio. They are close to investors. And other 10 that are active, so they are open to new angels and still building the portfolio. We are close to 170 angel investors among them, and more than 60 startups invested.
What is the average amount per fund, or what is the average amount that you invest in startups?
Okay.
What are stages?
Yeah, it really is different from fund to fund, as each of them has their investment thesis. When they are investing in very pre-seed stage, in the very early stage, tickets can vary from 50K to 100K. But then we have funds that are investing in later stages. This investment can go up to 50 or 300K. So this is the maximum. Usually this is the maximum that the funds go. But today we have been working a lot with other investors like VC funds or other angel networks so that we can co-invest with them.
Mm-hmm. And what are like sizes of these funds? Maybe you can
Okay, so
give some
the
examples.
goal of each fund, usually the goal of the fund is from 3 million to 5 million, 6 million for each fund, yeah.
How many money do investor has to have in order to start investing, and what amount of his wealth he has to
Yeah.
put?
We usually say never more than 10%. But I see some crazy people that put more than that. But it's a good advice. It's a wise thing is not put more than 10% of the wealth. According to the investment thesis, so if I'm an angel fund and I want to invest in 20 startups that are really, really early stage, and I'm going to invest like 50K, so I can have angels that are going to invest 20K, 30K, it's okay. If I'm investing in later stage startups, so it's hard to have, we cannot manage to have that amount of investors. So we need to have higher tickets per investor, so 50K, 70K, depending on the fund.
20, 30K, it is the amount of money which one investor puts into angel fund.
Yeah,
so not to one company.
Yeah, no, not to one company. The amount of money that an angel can invest in a fund, if it's a really early stage fund.
And do you have like capital calls, or they just put money when
they can put one time, but they can reinforce whenever they want. Reinforcement rates are really interesting to observe in groups that are well succeeded. So sometimes people start with the minimum amount, and then they keep every year they put something more because they see that the portfolio is growing. Once they see that some of the startups are getting some success, so they feel more comfortable, and also they are already used to that group. They see that the dynamic is working well, so they get more confidence to invest more. So they can reinforce whenever they want.
And how the decision is made? So how many votes must be? More than 50%, or how?
Two-thirds to approve a startup. Yeah.
What is average percentage of your angels in a group who are voting? So maybe 10-20%. They don't vote?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think that the groups that we have the least participation of angels, we can find some 40% not voting. But it's rare because sometimes the angels, they cannot attend the investment committee, but we always send the recording so that they can watch later and vote. And we usually set up like a week time for voting. So if you cannot attend the investment committee, you can watch the recording and vote later. And as we are investing our own money, it's really good that it's really wise to watch it and to vote. So sometimes we have like 40% of absence in voting, but it's rare. I think in many cases, people like to vote.
How often the positive decision is made? For example, you got 10 deals.
Yeah.
What is percentage? That 66+% will vote.
There are many, sometimes we have committees with no startups approved. And in startups, the committees, they can bring like 2, 3, or 4 startups. If it's online, we never recommend more than 3 because it's too much. People really get tired.
Do you have investment memorandum?
Yeah.
So some of leaders of group, they prepare like all information about the startup, analysis.
Yeah, indeed, the angels, when they go to investment committee, they already received the data room with the information from the startup. A deck, a financial, sometimes a video from the founder pitching or something, so that they can get more prepared to the investment committee. Not every angel all the time. Sometimes I go to investment committee without reading the material, I confess. But it's good because as you have more time to think of this after the committee, it's always good because you can exchange opinions with the other angels, and sometimes it changes your mind because many times you're watching a pitch and the person is a super person presenting, and you think it's the best idea of the world and for sure it will be a huge success. But then in the debriefing session, after all the startups have pitched, we discuss internally, And then you can listen to some different opinions from other angels who have more experience in that sector, and it can change your mind, or you can change the mind of the others. So it's an interesting process because you can feel really prepared by the files that you read. You go to investment committee and you change your mind, and then after discussing with the angels, you can change it again. But it's a good way of making a decision, right? So not only yourself, but also listen to the others.
So when you count it, like it is like half of half, like 20% or 25%
20%, yeah.
of
the startups brought were
So
approved.
first, for example, 100 startups are brought by angels.
So the scouted and the screening, because it's a huge
separate
things. The deal flow funnel is long. So we have a number that is a magic number of 2.5% of the scouted startups are invested in the end.
So scouted, does it mean that some investor brings the startup to the group?
No, scouting is still in the evaluation of the leader. Sometimes an angel investor can say, leader, look, I have this startup here that I met them. I think they're crazy good. Let's bring them to the committee. And so the leader talks to them, make out the analysis. These are still in the process of scouting to screening. They spend some time, they get some information. Then the leaders decide to bring to the investment committee. So the ones that are brought to the investment committee, they already passed through a lot of evaluation.
There was 100?
Yes.
Then on investment committee, it might be what amount?
100 in the investment committee could be like 10, and then you have 2.5 invested in the end.
Okay. So during this analysis, 90% of startups...
They are not going to the investment committee. And sometimes it's not a matter that they are not good or bad. It's just because they don't fit the thesis. And this is one thing that we've been trying to help the leaders in making this deal flow more effective. Because if you can upfront detect if that startup meets your thesis or not, you just don't need to spend a lot of time evaluating that business. So sometimes it's just a matter of matching the thesis or other circumstances that can avoid investment, and so the leader doesn't count and bring others to the committee.
What is the responsibility of angels? So how they help startups? How many of 170 angels contribute to startups?
I don't have this number precisely. What we make sure, and this is something that is inside our model, and this is something that we really talk to the leaders to promote, is that we have a figure inside COREangels that is the Archangel. The Archangel is a special angel in that fund that is dedicated to one startup. So this is a person that will build the bridge between that founder and the rest of the angels. And why this is important? Because you can imagine, I'm a leader of a fund and I have like 30 angels, and I'm building my portfolio. I have like 10 startups for a while. These 30 angels, they are a real asset to me, because these people, they come from different background, places, experience, everything. So it's a true asset of the fund. But how do I make sure that my startups, they're going to access this asset? So sometimes, and it's very common, a startup needs help in something. There is a person in that group that could help, but they are not talking to each other. They don't know. This person doesn't know the startup needs help. And the startup founders, sometimes they don't even realize that they could bring this to the angels. So having one dedicated angel to take care of that startup, to be in constant contact with those founders, it's important to guarantee that someone in the group knows what's going on with the startup, really, but beyond the numbers. Because the angels, they receive constant reports like KPIs, metrics. Oh, the revenue is growing. They had some issues with this type of clients, etc. But then, who is bringing some sauce to the numbers? Okay, so the Archangel is really helpful in this, because he can explain to the rest of the angels that, well, these things that happens to this KPI, it's happening because this and that. And then someone from the group can say, well, but I can help at this point. So put me in contact with them. So this Archangel is someone that makes this bridge.
How do you call them?
Archangel. Archangel. So the Archangel is a person who is in constant contact with the founders and can bring these struggles to the angels, and also can identify angels that can help the startups. So this is an important role in our model. Not all the startups have archangels sat yet. Some of them had just been invested. So it's something that the leader needs to do carefully, because it's important that you can match a person that can really contribute to that startup with a startup that is really willing to receive contribution. Okay, so we say that it's the good match is an angel that contributes with a founder that is coachable. So if a founder does not want help, we don't need to set up anything. So this is the role of the Archangel. It's really important to promote this involvement. But I would say that in our groups, it's expected that some angels, they would not be available to interact that much with the startups. Sometimes they are available, but the startups that have been invested, they don't have so much to contribute. It can happen also. But at least, and I say this to all the angels, at least with your experience of work, and sometimes it's just the help is, like being a sounding board, listening to the person and trying to think together and trying to get some options, and just doing that sometimes helps a lot. Of course, that some matters, some specific issues demand more deeper knowledge or experience. But in many cases, angels are really able to contribute.
So I want to know, when you started and joined COREangels, first you didn't know that you will launch new funds. So this was only one fund. And then you just thought that I see this here parallel with startup studios, that in startup studios, organizers or GPs of startup studios, they do the same processes again and again with startups. They repeat, and probably the same processes with VC funds, that new angels who want to launch a VC fund, it is difficult how to organize, how to attract people, how to fundraise, how to register. And you do like COREangels, it is like you have a studio of VC funds. And you help them
of angel funds. This is different, because VC funds, you have a GP that makes the decisions on investments, and as an LP, you just put the money. In angel funds, all the angels are deciding on their investment. So this is a different approach. So all the angels vote, and they are making decisions on their own money. So the leaders are not investing on behalf of angels.
So it is not VC fund, it is different.
Yeah, because a VC fund, usually you have a leader of that fund that makes the decisions on the startups to invest. And the LPs are usually not that involved in the process. In angel funds, all the angels, they have voting rights, and all of them needs to vote. And if the majority approves, so the startup will be invested. It's a shared responsibility.
Do they vote according to the money they put?
No, it's one vote per angel. It's really democratic.
So even if there are 30 angel investors in an angel fund, so they all vote for
in our model, yes, every angel has the right to vote. It's not mandatory. You can say, no, I don't want to vote. But then what you're doing is you're delegating to the rest of the group to vote for yourself. So your money is going to be invested.
So you also have commitment, like you just say that I put 50K to this fund, to angel fund, and you have a right to vote. So it is a difference. But legally, it is the same structure as VC fund or not?
Legally, it can have different approaches. Some of our groups, they are limited companies where every angel is a shareholder of the company. In other groups, we have regulated funds. In other geographies, we have a structure of SPVs. So it really changes according to the legal structure, the legal law of the place where it's based.
So in the US, is it just usual?
They use a platform that just do all the onboarding of the angels. It's really quick and easy to do.
So there is a VC fund, like
there
VC
is a fund
structure.
Yeah, it's a fund.
And here in Portugal and maybe in Brazil,
we have funds. We have limited companies. In Brazil, we have an SPV and a limited company, very different approaches.
Are there any more differences between VC funds and angel funds?
So usually in VC funds, they are investing other people's money. In angel funds, we are making decisions on our own money. It's one difference. The other thing is that usually angels are much more involved in the operations of the startups and have more connection with the founders. In a VC fund, an LP will not be in contact or really interacting closely to the founders. And this is important in our model. So promoting this interaction, of course, that each angel has its own availability. So some angels, they can be really available right now, but not that much 1 month later. Others, they are really hands-on and they can really help the founders with networking or some specific matters according to their background and experience. So I think this is basically the two differences. We see that our solution is very good to first-time angels and to experienced angels that are wanting more of the angel experience. So if you can set up this network of partners, deal flow is much easier. If the crisis, if the economic scenario worse like that, lasts a lot of time, yes, we'll be impacted. If it lasts a few years, we'll not be that impacted, because when it's over, then euphoria comes, optimism will come, and then the flow will start going again. I like to say that it's when you see a good opportunity, go for it. In the crisis or outside the crisis, go for it.
Let's continue to speak about differences between VC funds and angel funds. Like I understood, you, like team or GP, have less responsibility for decisions, and angels have more responsibility. Can you share what investors say? So do they like this model?
Yes, usually angels, when they are part of angel funds, they like very much being part of the decision. So they are making the decision on investing their money. So this is a basic difference. Because this way they get involved with the startups since the beginning. And so this is another difference between a typical VC funds and angel funds. The involvement starts with selecting the startups, but it continues after the investment. One of the things that we like to do is to promote this interaction between founders and angels, so that angels can help them in the phases that they are, like validating the product, looking for a good market strategy, finding their market still, and this is one of the differences.
What is the team of an angel fund? So usually in VC funds there are like analytics, there is GP, there is an investment committee.
Yeah, our structure, each angel fund is usually led by 1 to 2 or 3 leaders usually. Basically, one leader is more dedicated to startups, to looking for deal flow and bringing good startups for the voting, the investment committees. And the other leader usually handles more about fundraising. So fundraising, but not only fundraising from the right profile of people, because investing in startups is one thing, and investing as an angel is a specific thing. It's not everyone wants to be a real contributor or is available also to be involved with the startup. So usually the funds, they have 2 leaders or 3. Sometimes they hire people for punctual activities or something that they need some help. But we, as COREangels International, which is our staff, is also providing some templates, procedures, tools for them to make their lives easier. So we also have this analytics that you're saying. We also get the metrics from the funds. We are always consolidating and delivering some material to help the leaders. And so this is why it's good to be part of a network, because this way you can learn from the experience of the others. We have like constant meetings with all the leaders where they can share their practices, They can share where they are struggling, get some hints from the most experienced ones, and also all sorts of webinars and events that we promote among the community to make one learn from the experience of the other. So I think it's also a good value that we can deliver.
How do you attract those angel investors to your funds?
The responsibility of bringing investors to the funds is of the leaders, but of course COREangels helps with them. It's interesting to see that many people are starting to get interested about investing in startups lately. Some of them, they already had some experience in investing, but they were not satisfied with this experience. And so they look for us because they see that we have like a structured model, or they don't have to think about many aspects of investing, like, okay, I want to start investing in a startup, but where do I start? So do I have to understand all the legal terms of a term sheet, or all the legal terms of a contract? How do I make a good due diligence? How do I guarantee that I'm dealing with a good person, a good founder, a good startup? So all these questions, sometimes some angels, they have some experience, but they are not satisfied with these circumstances, so they look for us. In some cases, they look for COREangels as the brand as a whole, and then we can help them identify which would be the best group for them to join. Some of them are very focused in some industries. Others, they just want to start investing, start playing the game to learn a little bit more. So we usually follow these leads to the leaders.
How do you find those leaders?
Okay, good. Those leaders, some of them, they come from our community. So we have right now one leader that is an investor in one of our funds and thought of that and already has experience and applied to this program. Other people, they come like organically, and we also do some research on the ecosystems that we want to launch new funds, to look for people that are related to the environment, the ecosystem. It's much better, we learned that it's much better and much more efficient to get someone who is already passionate about this, and then this person can learn from our model, rather than just getting a person who is interested but has no experience. So it's interesting, it's important that the person is really committed and involved in the ecosystem space. This is one of the criteria to be accepted, but also having a co-leader so that you can share the responsibilities and the roles with another person.
What is profile of angel investors? So how they came to angel investing, for example, are they startup founders? Are they working for some corporations?
Yeah, we have some typical personas. One that is becoming very common is a person who is an executive in a big company and has been seeing something about innovation and startups. Sometimes this person is really bored at works and wants to be part of this innovation thing, has some money to invest, but doesn't have much guidance or doesn't have much, a good idea of how to start or how to do it. So this is a very interesting profile, because these people, they usually can contribute a lot to the founders in understanding how a cooperation works, what are the steps that you need to take, or even to make introductions to people that they can know. So this is one of the personas. We have entrepreneurs also. And it's very interesting, because the more the group is diverse, the more diverse is the group, the better is the dynamics, because you can see that in an investment committee, which is the meeting where we approve the startups, where we evaluate the startups, and after in the meetings of following up, we see that these different personas, they have different angles, and this is super rich to the founders. So if you have an entrepreneur, someone who has been an entrepreneur, they know exactly what it feels like, founding a startup and leading that challenge. So they can think of certain aspects that a person who has never done it could never do. On the other hand, a person who is in a big company can give some hints on how to take some shortcuts, or how to prepare themselves to present something, or how to identify the different people inside that big company that they need to have a buy-in. So these are two typical personas. But we also start to see other types of investors wanting to become angel investors. Because professional investors, they have certain types of investments in their wallets with different kinds of risks and liquidity and etc. And some of them who have been investing in traditional things, they start looking at it and say, well, let me take a look at this startup thing, okay? Yeah, it's a risky thing, it's a high risk investment, but maybe I could take like 5%, 10% of my wallet and direct to it. But then, of course, they are really afraid of the risks. So one of the strategies of reducing this risk is investing in portfolio. So it's not unusual that we have people coming from real estate wanting to invest something in startups, or family offices who already have some diversified investments that they want to do something more structured with in a more systematic way. So they find the portfolio approach and the angel fund approach a good way to start.
Let's talk more about educational program for new leaders of new VC, not VC, but angel funds. So what is its length? What is inside? How is it paid program or not?
Okay, so it's a program that is free of charge. Okay, the candidates that apply, they go through some evaluation from our side, because sometimes we see people that are really interested, but they don't have yet the experience or the availability to build this, because it takes time and effort to put this up. The program has a duration of 3 to 4 months, and we have two basic phases. So in the first phase, we are going to discuss, plan, think about this new fund. What is this for? What is the investment thesis? How the leaders think of the size of the portfolio, because if they want to invest in 20 startups, and the ticket size that they see for their market per investor is like 30K, they will have to have a lot of investors. So it's always a trade-off if you want to have more investors or less investors with a higher ticket size. It's not good to have very few investors, because it's good to have diversity and to have this contribution from them to the startups. But it's not really good, not really manageable to have too many investors. So it's a balance. And in this first phase, we think about this, the size of the portfolio, the investment thesis, the kind of angel persona that you want to attract. Because according to the investment thesis, it's better to have more corporate people or more entrepreneurs or more other types of investors. So we think of this, so it's a planning phase, and it's really self-paced, so they can access the content and the tools and build it. Then we have what we call a feedback session. This is a moment where they present to us, COREangels team, what they're thinking of a fund, and then we can make tons of questions to them. And then once we approve this feedback session, we go to a phase that it's really hands-on, because we start to really build in the group. So planning the first investment committee, executing the first investment committee, preparing the material, the deck of the group to share with the potential investors, helping them with criteria to make a good deal flow, to speed up the process but not leave behind good opportunities. So the second phase, it's really like, let's do it, okay? And then we start working together. They count on our support. Like, we have weekly meetings, we do a lot of work with them to make sure that they are able to launch the fund. And after doing this, then we start operating the fund, and it's just the beginning of the work.
Do these leaders that join this educational program have some benefits in comparison with future angels that join this angel fund? Like, do they get more information? Do they get some, I don't know, participation in those funds more than angel investors? Or it is just
they have a carry. Yeah, they have a carry, which is they get compensated when there is an exit and you're going to distribute gains among the investors. The leaders, they are entitled to receive a carry. This is one of the things. Of course, they are much more trained, and as a leader also, you were part, in our community, we have events that are for founders, events for angels, and events for leaders. So the leaders, not only through the program, the Launchpad program, but also during their journey in COREangels community, they are constantly receiving training, information, sharing practices. So in this sense, yes, they have some benefits comparing to the regular angel investors. So, but the idea is that really they can use everything that they are learning to deliver a better experience for these angels. And so, and sometimes what happens is that these angels, they start thinking of creating their own funds, which is also positive.
So they have all carry, or you have some participation like COREangels headquarters, or how?
Oh yes, yes, we do the carry. We do have some part of the carry. The majority of the carry go to the angels, of course, but then we have a part to the leaders and a small part to COREangels.
And if we try to understand what is management fee is used for, can you describe?
Yes, the management fees are paid whenever an angel invests in the fund. So it's not something that is paid yearly on top of the whole amount invested. It's something that is only paid one shot when the money is invested. And it's used to pay the work of the leaders, of course. So the leaders, they get the majority of the management fees, and they pay us, COREangels, part of this as a licensing fee for using not only the brand, but the tools, the methods, etc. That's how it works.
And like I understood, you attract future leaders through this educational program. So maybe you have some network in some cities, or some, I don't know, random angels around the world. They see that you have such program and they join it.
We do have some connections with different countries. We also have, we are part of some angel networks also, so this makes it easier to connect with people from different countries and continents. We also rely a lot on the indication of our current leaders, because our leaders, they are constantly in events, participating in many programs, events, and talking to people. And it's been quite often that we get very good candidates that were referred by a current leader, because they know exactly how it works. So it's the best reference possible, because they will talk to the leaders, and the leaders are the ones that can better describe what is the work they are doing, how they like it or not, and how was the engagement with COREangels. So it's becoming very common that we receive this kind of referrals.
10 years for the fund, do you think it is optimal period, or maybe you will shrink it to 6 years?
Yeah, according to the thesis, it can make sense to shrink it a little bit. If you're talking to something that is really high tech and that you really need some speed to prove it or not, it makes sense to be lower than that. But if we're talking about usual angel investing, I think 10 years, it's a good time for a fund to complete the cycle, because you would spend like 3 years to 4 years building the portfolio. And then, of course, you have the maturity of the startup, the growth of the startup. And although the angels can contribute, they cannot force things to happen. So in the end, once we build the portfolio, we need to focus, and one of our groups is already in this phase. We really need to focus in supporting the founders in their next challenges, helping them with next fundraising rounds, so that you can find some opportunities of exit, because the business is exiting a company that was invested. You know, the business does not end when you invest in a startup. It's just the beginning. I think that 10 years is good, and this is something that we make sure that the angels that are entering, they know about it, because it's a patient investment. So it's not something that you're going to receive reports in your mailbox saying, well, your profitability was this or that. You have to wait, you have to contribute, and then the growth will come.
And you mentioned that they can add some investments later. So for example, when we see, when a fund is starting, they put some money. So you have a management fee of 12.5 for the whole sum, for the whole period. How this work when they add more money to the fund later?
It's no problem. The same management fee will be calculated on this new money. So every time they reinforce, they get a management fee off that is paid to the leaders and COREangels, yeah.
And carry is 20%.
Yes, and it splits between the leaders and COREangels.
Now I will ask you about portfolio, like maybe you will give some examples of portfolio in COREangels, Atlantic, for example, or maybe you'll give some examples of portfolio in other new funds which are created.
Well, we have different, as we have different investment theses among the funds, we have different types of startups. There is a very interesting one. We have, basically in Atlantic, we have B2B startups. So, because when you are expanding internationally, companies are more likely to be similar than people. So it's much easier to export a business that is working for companies. We have companies dedicated to retail, like Size Bay is a virtual fitting room that is doing extremely well. Verdery, there is a e-commerce, social media. They are supporting many retails with this and expanding their sales through recommendations on social media. In Madrid, we have some startups dedicated to mobility who are growing very much. So not only new ways of mobility, but also reusing the existing equipment and etc. We have, in Lisbon, we have different kinds of startups dedicated to entertainment, sports, retail also. We are right now launching climate, and the 2 startups were already approved. One is like a marketplace for providers of climate startups and companies that want to fight against climate changes. So we have many different types of startups. Of course, they have different stages as well. So in some funds, the angels, they are really helping the founders with basic stuff like validating their products and trying to find the market. In others, the founders are already more established and they're getting some traction. So the problems are kind of different. So we start to see some problems related to conflicts and the leadership or growing the team or retaining talent. So we don't have much more that problems related to market, but more related to managing the business. And when they start growing a little more, we see other types of problems that are more related to the next fundraising, or how should they structure the operations, where should they move from one country to the other, should they start analyzing some opportunities for M&As. And so this is kind of different ways of contributing to the founders. And it's interesting because in some startups, founders are much more open to advice and to push from us. In others, they are more like, I know what I'm doing, so it's okay. And in the end, the founders are the one who are going to say how much we're getting involved or not. Because as angels, we invest a very small part of the equity. So we don't have any power to impose things to the founders. It's much more in a collaborative way. So to the founders that are really welcoming our help and wants our contribution, we are there for them. Some others, they know exactly what to do, and sometimes the best thing that we can do is just to stay quiet and observe them and be there for them.
Do startups think that going to COREangels is better than getting money from just random angels?
We start seeing this kind of referrals. And this is one thing we usually talk to leaders. That is, it's important that we have a good relationship, not only to the startups that we have invested, but also the startups that were not approved. And it already happened that a startup that was not approved by the committee recommended other startups because they said, well, look, these guys, they are serious, they are doing the right way, they are, good people to deal with. So this is really important to us, to treat founders the way they deserve, because they are making a huge effort to change the world in the end. So they really deserve better angels, and that's what COREangels looks for delivering.
When you invest, do you usually lead a round, or there are other investors, or it doesn't matter for you?
We have funds with majority of being the only investors in the startup, but the leaders are starting to mix it a little bit. So having some startups where they are the leaders or they are the only investors in that round, and mixing with other startups so this way they can reach more later stage startups, but they are co-investing with other investors. And these other investors, they can be outside COREangels, so some VC funds or angel networks, but they can also be inside COREangels. So we have cases of startups that have been funded by 2 or 3 different groups from us. And this is also interesting because this way we have sometimes a startup is in one place and is invested by this regional group, but then if it gets the investment of a different group, the angels of that group will also help them go to another market. So you get different types of support from different geographies.
Can you give more examples of how different groups interact with each other? Yeah. So do you have some global meetings where you share the deals and deal flow?
Yeah, indeed. We don't have... one of the things that we want to build is a more systematic way of sharing deal flow. Because today what happens is that each fund, they have their own dynamics. So sometimes when a leader say, well, we are looking at this, what do you think? Is it good for you? They are just planning an investment committee for 2 months, so it's not the right timing. So we are studying a way of making it more structured and easy to the leaders to share deal flow and to communicate with each other. Usually what they do right now is we have a common communication tool and they share there when they think it's interesting to other groups. Or in our leaders meeting. So every 2 weeks we have leaders meeting with all the leaders to share some information or to discuss some issue. And sometimes in these leaders meetings, one leader say, well, I'm analyzing something that's really good to you, don't you want to see? And that they can analyze. So, but in the end, it's an individual, it's a collective decision of each group. So it can happen that, and it already happened, that a startup presents to 2 different groups. One approves, the others doesn't, and it's okay.
Maybe if we can cover a bit more about legally structures, for example, in Europe, in LATAM, in the US. So can I ask you? Okay.
Yeah, sure. In Europe, what we usually see is we see a lot of angel networks, so angels by themselves.
Syndicates.
Syndicates, exactly. So syndicates are very common in Europe, in the US as well. But we start to see, and we have been being successful in expanding this model to Europe because they feel like it's good to have this approach of investing all together. Usually the structure here in Europe, we have funds that are limited companies, and so the angels, they are shareholders of a limited company. It has the pros and cons, of course, but when you are starting, if you're going to a regulated fund since the beginning, the cost structure is not good. So it's really costly. You have to pay a lot, like to 20,000, 30,000 per year to be in a fund, in a regulated fund.
Per year, or it is just
you have one shot, and then you have a maintenance, and sometimes you have a carry, or you have many arrangements, but it's really costly to a fund that is starting. So if you have to build a small fund as a regulated fund, it's not a good deal. So we usually recommend, if you're going to launch a small fund, do it as a limited company. Yes, you have the issues with taxes, yes, but this is the real world. When you're talking about getting fundraising more money, so when you're thinking of 5 million, 10 million, then it can make sense. If you think you're going to get this money since the beginning, then it makes sense to think of a regulated fund. It has more, some things are easier in a regulated fund, others are much harder, but it's a good way also to work. It also depends on the country you're based. So in some countries we have tax issues different from another. So it's something that really needs an evaluation of a local lawyer to help the leaders on that. In Latin America, we are using, usually they use limited companies also, or SPVs who are instruments for specific deals. They can use this also. This is regularly what we've been seeing. In US, you have also funds, and we have been using, and today the thing is, a trend that we see is that we see more and more people building solutions for VCs and angels. So having platforms where you can launch a fund very easily. This is a trend, this is something that is growing, and it really comes to solve some issues of bureaucracy and documentation and onboarding the angels. This can be a really good experience to some of the funds.
So the main difference, like I understood, or the choice is based on the amount of money, or in
the amount of money is important, one
Uh-huh.
thing, because the cost structure may impact the financial health of the fund. This is one thing. The other thing is tax-wise. So in some countries, you can have high taxes when you are a limited company, or you can have, and the taxes may vary.
Can you give an example? What countries like? What countries are better for classical VC fund structures?
Well, for funds, well, here in Portugal we have both. We have limited companies and funds. It's usually much better tax-wise as being a fund, but as I said, it doesn't make sense if you're too small. In other countries in Europe, is like being very hard to be a fund because you have a lot of taxes. In Brazil, definitely a fund structure is super expensive. So only if you are really big enough. US, you can have better structures of funds, which means that if you are a little smaller, you can consider being a fund, using a fund. But using the limited company approach is not a problem. It's a much simpler way to start. In fact, it's as simple as opening a company in a country. So some countries you can take forever to open a company. In others, it's really one day or a couple of days. So many times, this is the way we start. We launch, although we can have more taxes in the future, but it's really more easy to manage. So
let's start with, again, comparison angel funds with syndicates. As I know, syndicates are structures, or not structures, but communities where angels decide whether to invest in this startup or that startup. And for every deal, for example, even if it's not 66%, but 10% are ready to invest and they invest. So how can I compare those models, benefits, pros and cons of each?
Sure. Yeah, in angel syndicates, there are two basic differences between angel funds and angel syndicates. In angel syndicates, the decision is individual. Although everybody watches the same pitch and gets to know the same startup, I will make a decision if I'm going to invest or not. And if I'm the only one, I can do that. If I have 2 or other 3 colleagues doing the same thing, we can invest together in this startup in the same moment. But we are 3 individuals investing in that startup. In this sense, after you invest, it's harder for you to be following up like systematically the results of the startup, how is it going, etc. This is one thing. The other difference is that angel syndicates, they usually, the fees, the angels, they pay a membership, so they pay annually something, and that's it. And so in the end, not necessarily only investors are there. So anyone who pays a membership can be watching the pitches. So I may be a consultant for startups, and I pay that membership because then I'll get to know some of my potential clients in the future, and I can use that platform for this reason. Okay, this is one thing. So when you are in a meeting with an angel syndicate, not everyone there is an investor, okay? It doesn't need to be like that. But of course, it can be a good option, especially if you're a very experienced angel and you say, well, I know exactly what to invest, I'm really used to that, so it makes sense, and you start building your own portfolio. But you will never be able to have the same type of follow-up of the startups that we have in a portfolio fund, because in the end, the fact that all the angels are sharing the same portfolio makes us partners in some startups and makes us have the interest, a shared interest in following up with them and helping them make their business grow. So it's not only in the moment of investment, but especially after the investment. In the portfolio approach, you can have much more reports and interaction with the founders and contribute more to the success of the startup.
What does the daily routine of an angel look like?
Okay, well, this is a good question because not all angels are created equal. So we have diversity of profiles in our network. Some people, they are just angel investors. That's what they do for a living. Now they have accumulated some wealth and now they are investing and reinvesting and they have exits. These people, you see that they study the pitches before, the financial projections, they get more sharp questions to the founders during the pitches or even later. So sometimes they do save some time also to check with the customers of that startup what's really going on, because when you watch a pitch, a person can tell whenever they want. So it's good to have someone that can follow up with the customers, get some referrals. This type of angel also likes to help the leaders in detecting good deals. So this is the kind of angel that wants to go to the events and gets to know startups and bring some things to the leaders so that it can help on the deal flow. Other types of angels, as you said, they are working with something else, so they don't have enough time to be dedicating to the activity. But we see that even people who are very busy and working in their companies, they like to watch the recording, talk to the people in the WhatsApp group and say, oh, I like this one, what do you think? I'm going to vote. So they like to participate somehow. Sometimes they don't have enough time to be with the founders all the time, but they like to be part of it and they like to know what's happening and sometimes make a few introductions. Usually, even these people who are very busy, usually if a founder comes or an Archangel comes and say, look, this startup from our portfolio, they need help on this, this, and this. Can you help? The person will say, yes, let me do something here and the book in the agenda that, well, Tuesday from 1 to 2, I'm going to talk to this founder, or I'm going to send some emails introducing these people to some friends of mine, and it works.
Describe your day like a CEO of COREangels.
Recording something and then checking the event, talking to Ella, and I have a report to send today. So,
At what time do you start to work?
At what time I start working? Usually I leave my daughter at school. I leave her at school at 8. So I come back, but I then work out and do something to get ready for the day. And I usually start working at 9.
And what is your day like? Describe your yesterday.
Oh, yesterday. Yesterday it was Tuesday, right? Yeah. Oh, yesterday it was a typical day indeed. So I woke up. My daughter is not in school right now because they are on spring break. But usually I leave her at school. And then I come back and I have breakfast and then I work out a little bit, read something. I like to read in the beginning of the day because then when I start working, it's really tough to stop, you know. Then I work until 1 p.m. and I prepare lunch, or sometimes I order or go somewhere else to have lunch. And then I come back and I work until 6. Yeah.
What is your duties? What is your responsibility? What calls do you have?
Well, every week is different. So yesterday I had a meeting with a lawyer because we are looking for a different law firm to support us. Then I had an interview with a person that is a candidate for a position in our team. Then I had a meeting to discuss the report with the results of the quarter to send to the investors. And I sometimes I have meetings also with the leaders because each one is facing different struggles according to their stages and their funds. I'm also preparing my trip to South America on the end of the month because I'm going to WebSummits Rio. And then I'll go to Chile to visit our leaders in Santiago from Pacific, COREangels Pacific. So it's kind of crazy. So every day is a different thing.
It's interesting. I was on this in this Web Summit in Lisbon. And I'm thinking, what do you usually do on Web Summits?
It's crazy. You know, I love the event, but I get exhausted. In the end of the event, I am totally destroyed because what do I do? Well, I like to look for the startups. I like to go and talk to the founders in the booths. I like doing this a lot. There are many interesting people doing amazing stuff. Sometimes they are good for some of the funds, and then I introduce leaders, and it's okay. I like to watch some talks. I'm starting to get more used to WebSummit. So in the beginning, I was like, oh, I want to watch everything. But today, I know that some talks are really too commercial. Others, we have more content. So it's a good opportunity also to watch interesting people talking, but meeting people, you know, like networking. And when I arrived in Portugal, my first Web Summit, I didn't know anyone. It was just, wow, this talk and this startup, amazing, and taking pictures, etc. It's the buzz of the event. In the second one, I already know some people. Now I meet many people there, you know, that from here, from Portugal, but also from Brazil, from Spain, from US, from many countries. So it's a nightmare.
Many of them are angels.
Angels. I have many colleagues working with innovation in big corps because right now we are seeing this move of corporates that want to bring innovation to their daily lives. So we see, I have many people taking these roles in big companies. Founders also, there are some founders that I have never invested on them, but we keep chatting once in a while. So sometimes they call me or send me an update. And when they come into Web Summit, I know that we'll be meeting, and it's super good also. So it's like that. It's amazing, but it's a nightmare because it's a lot.
I want to ask about how you teach your leaders to create a deal flow. So what are insights about how to attract the most interesting founders of startups?
So one of the things to avoid is to waste a lot of time with the wrong startups. Sometimes it's a matter of making the questions in the right order. So to qualify the startups before engaging in longer discussions. The worst thing that can happen is that you spend like 40 minutes with the startup, and in the end, you find out that this startup doesn't match your investment thesis. So you have wasted your time and the time of the founder. So this is not good. One of the things that really work is that if you can share your existence of your fund to where the startups are born, or to where the startups are passing by, like incubators, accelerators, organizations of mentorship of startups. So if you can think of what these good guys would be doing, like where they're going to request help or they're looking for help, and if you go to these people and say, look, I have an angel fund. We are angels that want to support and fund startups. So if you know people like with this profile, just let me know. This is the best way, because then the deal flow will come to you, and it will usually happen in a more qualified way. So the people who are going to send you deal flow, they know what you're doing. It's important also that you send feedback to these people, because then they can, like an AI, you know, like they can understand and learn better about what you're doing, so they can send better qualified founders. And it usually happens like this. If you can build this network of partners, because it's super interesting also for them that they can send good deals for you. So if you can set up this network of partners, deal flow is much easier. We also, in COREangels, sometimes we receive applications from startups. We receive contacts from startups that say, well, I want to apply for funding. And then we help guide them through the more proper fund to their case, and also help the leaders with the deal flow this way.
Another part of leaders' job, so how they evaluate startups. I understand that this is done by a group of angel investors, but how do you teach what are the main parts of this process?
Okay, so usually in our Launchpad program, we talk about this to leaders, like we have like a checklist or some criteria of what to look at startups. This can be different from person to person, of course. There are people that they prefer a startup that is addressing a huge market and they don't care that much about the founders. There are other people that they prefer having founders that they think are amazing and the solution is not that good enough, but they believe in the team. So it's really personal in some aspects, but we have some key things that are common and that every leader should take a look at. So we share this with them. About the process, some of our funds, they use tools like Gust to do the deal flow and do the evaluations and share information with the investors. Others, they build their own Airtable, Notion, something. So they are free to choose the tools they want. We recommend a few tools for each part of the evaluation. And in some groups, in some funds, there are angels that they want to participate in the screening process, okay? So in one of our funds, the leader created a first committee, it's like a selection committee. So with these angels that were more interested in discussion, things like valuation, or is this enough traction or not enough traction? Is this really good to our thesis or not? So this kind of thing. So these people are helping the leader in doing the screening. And it's also good because when it comes to the investment committee, we have not only the leader supporting the startup, but also other angels. So it's also good to the process.
Mm-hmm. And can you mention other tools or services which you use in your work?
Yeah, we use data from PitchBook, Crunchbase. We use Gust, as I said, for deal flow, for screening. We build lots of things, from our own, from some local platforms. Some groups, they use Airtable to deal flow. So it's really on the decision of the leaders, what they are more comfortable using. We have some recommendations, but the only thing that is mandatory that they use is our platform to share information between the groups. So this is mandatory because if you choose yours, you will not be able to share with the others. But all the rest regarding the operations of the group, they are able to decide.
What are your goals in COREangels? What is your main focus now?
Good. We have three basic goals, like I would say short-term, mid-term. We want to continue expanding the growth of the network, of course, but we need to manage resources in dedicating our team not only to grow the network, but also to support our existing groups. So we truly believe in the power of the network effect. So we really need to build structures and methodologies to make these groups interact one with the other so that it can leverage the opportunity that they have. The other goal that we have is also to support the existing funds, the active funds, to reach their goals. And for this, we truly believe in the power of the network effect. So we need to build more structured ways, methodologies, and processes to make sure that the leaders are contacting with each other, that they can share opportunities of investments, that if a startup is growing really well in one portfolio, Another leader can bring this startup to pitch for a follow-on in their group. So this kind of opportunities, we start to seeing this, we're starting to explore this, but it's still not very structured. So this is one of our goals for the short term, I say, is to build this in a more systematized and more structured way, to guarantee that all the funds, they have access to this kind of opportunity. Because if you think that we have geographic funds and vertical funds, suppose that you are an angel in a geographic fund and you watch a pitch of a startup that has already been invested by a vertical group who are the specialists on this industry. So you have much more confidence and investment in the startup if it's brought by another group from COREangels. The third one is not only share between the leaders, but also improving and strengthening our community. So increasing the interactions between the angels and the founders from different groups. Because sometimes an angel who is in Europe is facing the same struggles of an angel who is in Latin America or in the US or in Egypt. So it's good to have this common table for people to share and to learn from trends or good practices, and have some hot topics in angel investing that they have never heard about, and then we can bring them to these topics. So we really want to improve our presence within the community of all COREangels roles, leaders, founders, and angels.
What changes are now in VC ecosystem, VC world? So what do you think trends are now? For example, you are starting this angel funds, and it is quite new direction. What do you think? Will it take some market from, I don't know, from syndicates or from VC funds?
I see. And I don't think that it will take market from VC funds, because we are in different level of investments and different stages of investment. I've seen in the past years sometimes VC funds moving a little more to the early stage, but I think they are getting back again because of the high risk, etc., and the economic scenario that we are facing right now. What I do believe is that first, it's really hard to measure the angel market, because we have many angels that are solo angels, and we don't see them in any of the networks, we don't see them in any of the funds. So it's really hard to, if you ask me how many angels do we have in the world, I don't have this answer, nobody has this answer, okay? What we do see is what we think that will happen, and something that we are betting on, is bringing the access of investing in startups to other people who are not angel investors yet. We see that our solution is very good to first-time angels and to experienced angels that are wanting more of the angel experience. So experienced angels that want to really take part in the life of the startups, they like our model. And first-time angels, they like our model because it's a good way to start. You don't need to understand contracting. You don't need to be looking for the deal flow. So you just get the best part of it. That is sitting there, knowing the startups, voting, interacting with them later. So I think that many people, and we've been seeing this in our funds, many people who were a little curious about it, but never took this first step, they are trying to make this with our experience. And
now it's like downturn on the market in VC.
Yeah.
So do you feel it on yourself?
What we see, and we've been seeing some data about it, is that usually when the scenario it's worse, the VCs they suffer first. They are impacted first, because they are in the later stage. So these rounds that could happen, so the valuations, they go down, they don't have much deals. So the next investors of the VC portfolio will not be so into investing right now. Okay, so VCs, they suffer it first, they are impacted first. M&As, etc. So later stage investment opportunities, they are impacted first. We are impacted later, because we are here building the early stage thing. If the economic scenario worse like that, lasts a lot of time, yes, we'll be impacted. If it lasts a few years, we'll not be that impacted, because when it's over, then euphoria comes, optimism will come, and then the flow will start going again. So what we see from our angels' behaviors is that, yes, they can be more selective in the investment. I don't see like they reducing the tickets, but in the early stage, you don't have too much to prove. Okay, so if you're talking about later stages, yes, investors can be more picky, like requesting more traction, more numbers, more expansion, or more metrics. In the very early stage, all you have is like, prototypes, MVPs, promises, markets. So it's hard to become more picky. Of course, you are more selective because you don't want to waste money. But the deals are there. The investment committees continue happening. I like to say that it's when you see a good opportunity, go for it. In the crisis or outside the crisis, go for it. But identifying what is a good opportunity can be different when you have a worse scenario. Like
one more moment, I want to understand about your model. Yeah. So you do follow-on investments?
Sometimes. Follow-ons can be very tricky. Usually when you have, and there is a research that shows the portfolio can be positively impacted by the active involvement of the angels, okay? But they don't see a good correlation with follow-ons. And why? Because sometimes you invest in a follow-on not because you think it's a good opportunity for the future, but you're trying to prevent losing money from the investment you made. So it's really tricky when you bring a startup that is already in your portfolio to pitch for your angels again. Sometimes we do invest, but when it's the case of, well, let's try to not lose money. If you're not investing, they will close, they will shut down. So let's invest. This is the worst case of investment, because probably this startup will die in 1 year or 2, and you will lose this money that you have invested. So it's always important to share with the angels that, well, we are evaluating this startup that is in our portfolio, but let's take a look at this thinking of the future. Do we really think that they are making good progress? They have good signs. Sometimes they want the money to make some changes. Let's change the business model because this is not working. Yes, you can do that. You can invest. But do you really think it has potential? This team is able to lead this movement to make this happen. So follow-ons are something that we usually, and in the planning phase of the launchpad, this is one of the aspects of our simulator. We have like an economic simulator that the leaders will fill in to understand how the fund will look like. And follow-ons is one of the assumptions. So are you thinking of having follow-ons, 10% of your money going to follow-on, 20%? How much? Of course, this is a number to set up as a goal. And of course that the leader can change this along the journey of the fund. But it's something to be very cautious about.
We'll then find the link to this research that's showing that follow-ons are like not usually is a better investment.
Yeah.
Is it for VC funds also, yes? Or it is for angels more?
I think so, because it happens in stocks, right? Sometimes you have bought a stock in the stock market and it goes down, down, and down. And then get some, let me put money on this because I want to build a good price, but the stock keeps going down, down, and down. And so you're going to lose your money. And it can happen to startups. It happens a lot, This is what we call like a zombie startup. It's a startup that didn't grow as we expected, but they are still trying. And they're still looking for some possibilities, and we're still betting on them, but it's never getting anywhere. And then what happens is that you spend a lot of time, the time of the angels, the time of the founders, because sometimes the best thing to a founder is having a follow-on denied, No, we don't see a future in this. And then the founder can think, well, if they don't see a future, maybe I should reconsider, or maybe I'll shut down and create something later, or, So this is why.
towards this?
Yes, in fact, we had this impression that we have an underserved market when we talk about female health. So the first step was, let's take a look at this market because it looks like we don't have many solutions being funded to address some females' health issues. And so we started looking at the health issues of women, and they are really not so well funded. And we truly believe that this is an underserved market. Women would pay for solving some of their issues. And so that's why this motivated us to start researching about these startups and these opportunities of business.
Cynthia, am I right that you are going to create FemTech-focused fund?
Yes, indeed. We are working on this right now.
How the idea came, so what are your first steps towards this?
Yes, in fact, we had this impression that we have an underserved market when we talk about female health. So the first step was, let's take a look at this market because it looks like we don't have many solutions being funded to address some females' health issues. And then we started saying that, yes, there are some great ideas, but they are not so funded. And why is that? So basically, we have an industry that is really dominated by men. So this leads us to an obvious bias of decision because female health is not something that is really interesting to the majority of men, of course, the majority of them. And it's not something familiar. So if you talk to a man and you ask him about what are good opportunities in the health industry to female health that you would invest in, and maybe they won't know about it. And this is understandable. We can understand that. So we started looking at some very interesting stories about exits of female femtech startups. Usually they are led by female founders. Female founders, today the numbers show something between 2% and 3% of the amount of funding to startups go to female-led startups. And the more we see female investors engaging, this number can increase, I believe. And so we started looking at the health issues of women, and they are really not so well funded. And we truly believe that this is an underserved market. Women would pay for solving some of their issues. And so that's why this motivated us to start researching about these startups and these opportunities of business. Then we started looking at what we call FemTech Plus, that is other stuff that are not directly related to FemTech, to female health, but they are ideas that can somehow help women in progressing in their careers, in having more opportunities, having more free time, because it's not only health issues, physical health issues, but also mental health issues. And with the charge of work, the amount of work that lays on top of women's minds, it's really hard to have a professional that is with mental health and dealing with all the struggles that they do have to face at work also.
I have several ideas. Maybe I will share at least one.
Okay.
What I like the most,
Okay.
and you'll give your feedback. How is the idea valuable or not?
Okay.
Already a lot of competitors who did it, but they are not successful. Okay, so first it is 50-50, an app that helps parents share the responsibilities of child rearing equally. It provides a platform that allows parents to easily communicate and coordinate with each other, ensuring that both parents are involved in key activities such as feeding, bathing, changing diapers, and more. The app also allows parents to track their progress and maintain a log of completed tasks. This not only ensures that both parents share the workload, but also helps to build a stronger relationship between them. So do you think that its idea can be done? Maybe you know some other apps, similar apps that are not just femtech but like relationship.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting idea. I would pay for it when I had my babies. I also like to think not only the sharing responsibilities between the couples, but also I think that it would be also very useful to parents who have divorced and they share the guards of the kids. So it's because I've seen many divorced couples saying that, well, our lives got a lot easier when we put everything in Google and we just talk through software and we just don't call anymore. So I think this is an interesting thing. The only part that we need to understand is how much of relationship we are putting into numbers and measurements. And so this can be also a burden, you know? So, but yeah, I like that.
Did you encounter some similar ideas of apps or I don't know, startups which
Yeah, I have there are some startups trying to approach not only the things with kids, but how much a female professional can handle or can handle better the time, because in the end women, they face a lot of difficulties because they have to take care of the house much more than men, and so it leaves very short time for studying, for investing in their career, or sometimes to getting some jobs that they need to travel. So it really it's really a blocker to female careers. There are some marketplaces or some apps that tries to make this. I have never seen a one-stop shop, you know, for this. But we have some platforms also bringing coaching for women, or in some financial literacy to make them more aware of financial managing, so that they can also plan stopping for a while when they are mothers and they save some money and manage this for a while. So there are some interesting ideas on this matter, and it's not female physical health, but I think it's really important to our days and to women and all.
Second idea is Businesswoman. It is a community and educational platform for women who are not ready to take a 2-3 year break from their professional lives during pregnancy and child rearing, but want to support each other and learn how to continue working either as a freelancer or by developing a business during this period.
Okay, so the idea is that they could be learning how to have different occupations during the childhood of their infants.
Yes, and how they can like support each other. That I know I don't know, I downloaded the app 50/50 and we share with my husband all responsibilities.
Yeah, there are many communities already around these types of topics. I've never seen any of them becoming a business, like with a business model and financial sustainability. But there are more and more communities where women are trying to support each other, trying to bring ideas for having a better life or sharing responsibilities with their husbands. So I think that we are in this movement, but it's hard to make this become a business and to be
to monetize this
community. Also because there is something like, well, should we be monetizing this? You know, there is always this kind of issue when we're talking about impact investment, when you're talking about this kind of communities. But yes, there are many initiatives like this.
So now your ideas.
My ideas. Okay. Oh, we have many startups that we have been studying. So there is an amazing startup from Portugal. They have developed a glove with sensors that can help women to do the self-exam to prevent breast cancer. They got investment. I knew them in a pitch presentation. And it's a really good idea, and we can save lots of lives, because detecting cancer in early stages can save women's lives, so breast cancer. We have apps now that are trying to monitor menopause symptoms. And this is an issue, because we all talk about period, we all talk about the first period, but we are not very used to talk about menopause. Menopause is not like a turnkey, you know, it's years that a woman spends suffering from tens of symptoms. It impacts sleeping, it impacts sexual health, it can bring depression, many symptoms that can be associated with menopause. And recently I read a report about thousands of women in the UK leaving their jobs by that age because they wanted to deal better with menopause and they can handle both things. Breastfeeding apps, like when a woman is breastfeeding, she's doing this sometimes in the middle of the night. She doesn't know if she has breastfed with the right breast, with the right breast, the left breast, at what time. So it could also help, and it also helps managing this kind of things. The amount of women that get consultants of breastfeeding, they could do that in an app, like with a teleconsultant or with a nurse, and help them in this moment that is really hard. So there are many things. We just saw also, recently I saw an interesting startup doing high quality analysis of data about in vitro fertilization. Because today, in vitro fertilization is a lot of betting and is a lottery in the end. And they're working on a model to try to monitor some KPIs and predict better responses to this kind of the fertilization. So it's interesting because in the end, people who are trying to do fertilization, they spend a lot of money because they do it several times. And if you can reduce this is not an issue only for women, but for women and men who wants to try this method. So these are just a couple of examples.
Cool. Thank you very much, Cynthia.
Thank you,
So
Max.
now maybe you can do some short pitch to potential angel investors why they should join COREangels.
Okay, good. Yes, indeed, to angels who are already investing in startups but want to have good experience in following up to them and actively contributing to their success. I think our model is a must, is really interesting. For the ones who are curious about knowing more about startup investing, it's also a great model to start because you have all the other angels as colleagues to vote, to analyze, to discuss. And also you count on a leader, on a professional leader that will bring good deal flow, good opportunities, and will also help in managing the portfolio later. So that's my invitation.
Max Pog builds a startup studio.